Thank you, and thank you all for joining me this afternoon. Teachers that will take time out to think about and reflect on what they're doing are really some of the most dedicated people and the nicest people in psychology, I find as well. I thought I'd give you a little bit of an overview first of who's taking the AP exam. The exam was first given in 1992 to 3,900 students. Last year, nearly 270,000 students at some 7,000 high schools completed the AP exam, among the even greater number who took the course. And given the continuing rate of growth, we can assume that something like 300,000 students will be taking the AP exam this coming spring. That's just a tremendous growth, and it is, as I tell my college colleagues, college-level psychology. You all are spending some 4 times as many class hours with your students face-to-face as the typical college and university instructor are with their students. So it's exciting. It's impacting college teaching. Here at my own institution, Hope College, we're now teaching fewer sections of introductory psychology than we used to because so many of our students are coming in with college credit having completed the AP exam. Just to give you a little overview, what I thought we might do today is review some tips for effective classroom teaching that have been contributed by master teachers of psychology. Then take a look at the organization of the AP course and see how this influences the new text we have out, and then answer and respond to your questions and your comments. So that's the overall plan here, and I look forward to hearing from you at the end. First, what I harvested were some tips from master teachers on the Teaching in Psychology listserv. That's tips. These were people who were asked by a young teacher of psychology, tell me, those of you who have been doing this for some time, what would make me an effective teacher of psychology? What advice can you give to me? And here are some of the suggestions that I resonated with from other master teachers of psychology, such as be positive, catch people doing something right, and encourage and support them for it. My own writing mentor, Jack Riddle, poet, essayist, who's guided me through some 5,000 pages of my writing and has been an award-winning teacher, uses this by catching his students, including me, when the rhythm is working, when the cadence is there, when the voice is coming through, and affirming and rewarding that. Second, give frequent and fast feedback. It takes no longer to read exams or papers immediately and hand them back the next class period and then have it off your shoulders and not looking forward to, as it does to wait a week or two, and students appreciate it. Be enthusiastic. And if you're not enthusiastic, fake it. And don't worry about overdoing it. There's research that shows that people that are naturally introverted and low-key, when asked to fake enthusiasm, are still not as outgoing and enthusiastic as those who are naturally so and asked to tone it down. But don't expect your students to be as enthusiastic as you are, especially those guys in the back row with their baseball caps on backwards, slouched down. And remember, they lack your knowledge. Things that are obvious to you won't be obvious to them. It's obvious to us what negative reinforcement, for example, really is. It seems like a simple concept, but nobody seems to get it right. And half our students miss it when we ask exam questions about it. This is called, by the way, the curse of knowledge. When we know something, it's just hard to imagine what it's like to be on the other side without that knowledge. And some more tips from these master teachers. Give lots of practical examples. My first textbook editor, when she gave back my first chapter, counseled me, Dave, just remember this. For every abstract point, you must have a concrete example. And that is a maxim I've tried to apply in writing as well as in classroom teaching. Make questions concrete. I sometimes have, in the past, asked a question like, well, does anybody have any comments or questions? Kind of a vague general question, and the class just kind of gives me a blank look. I have another colleague, great teacher, and have observed her teaching, and I noticed after presenting something or showing a video, she wouldn't ask a general question. She would ask a specific down-to-earth question, like, when George said this to Amy, how did that make you feel? And that would stimulate discussion. Have patience awaiting answers. Many of us, particularly novice teachers, are uncomfortable with silence, but then so are our students, and so if we'll just wait, often something will be forthcoming. And it also helps if we ask people to write their response to a question before asking them to speak it. Take out your pens and write for 30 seconds on this question, and then ask if anybody's willing to share. Lots of people now actually have something to share. Assume your introductory students will never take another psych course, and thus your question as a teacher, mine as a writer, is to ask the question, what do educated people need to know? When they've forgotten the details of what we're teaching, what are the big ideas we hope they'll remember? And to keep our eye on those big concepts, those big ideas. And yet some more tips. Do say, when you don't know, when you're stumped by a question, I don't know. And entertain ideas about how one might go about answering that question. And in fact, maybe digging up more information as part of a class inquiry process. And finally, realize that in teaching as in life, two things are certain. Number one, you're going to make a fool of yourself at some point. And number two, you're going to have your heart broken. Even the best of teachers out there get some terrible student reactions and student evaluations. What did you find beneficial about this course? One of my students responded, nothing. If you think that the course could be improved, what would you suggest? End the course. What advice would you give to a friend who's planning to take the course? Don't. That's every teacher's experience. Having our hearts broken at some point, and it's those negative comments that sometimes we remember that sting the most. To these, I would just add some of my own teaching tips acquired from a profession's worth of experience. One, this is something that comes more easily to high school AP teachers than it does to college teachers, but learn names. Take time out early on through various name learning exercises, taking photos of students, so you have a crib sheet with photos to help learn the names. For me as a college instructor, it would be assigning everybody to visit me for 5 minutes. Now, if you're my friend James Moss, teaching psychology to the largest lecture class in North America, as he did for some years, having taught some 70,000 introductory psych students in a single section of 1,800 students in the fall semester at Cornell, you don't learn students' names. But the rest of us can do so. Secondly, if we're going to have questions about grades or exam questions, students complaining, I encourage people to not take up class time to do that. Partly, I don't want to be embarrassed by having to wrestle with the question and be embarrassed. But also, I want to engage students one-on-one after class. And I also, when asking multiple choice questions, give students an out. If you think the problem with the question is not your understanding, but the question, I got a deal for you. You're welcome to convert any multiple choice question into a short essay. Simply don't answer it on the multiple choice form. Rather, write me a short answer. Now, you're going to take your chances because you might have guessed right, and your answer might display ignorance. But students seem to appreciate that, and if I have a class of 35, there might be 5 or 6 in the class. We'll choose to do that for 1 or 2 or 3 questions, and it just takes a few minutes to read them, and it gives me some insight into my own questions as well. Third, teach, talk, lecture less. I took to doing this once I started using my own text materials, and thus my best lecture material was gone, and my student responses improved as I substituted activities, demonstrations, discussion, video clips, and other things for some of the lecture content. Next, and this is something I see few college teachers giving thought to, create the physical space to enable to happen what you want to happen in terms of the pedagogy you want to happen. This is a classroom that, from my perspective, is not a great room. You've got a room that's too big with students kind of spread out around. Research in the social psychology of what's called social facilitation shows that when people are spread out like that, there's less energy. Jokes are less funny. People are less aroused and engaged than if they're closer together, as you perhaps experience in a more typical classroom. Now, if you want to encourage discussion, you can, of course, arrange the chairs to give people face-to-face contact, or there's an intermediary classroom, and I would, even with movable chairs, set them up in kind of concentric circles like this, focused on the instructor at the front, and yet giving students visual access to each other to encourage the kind of conversation I wanted to happen in class. So think about the physical space. I would, if I'm teaching 35 students in a room that has 45 chairs, and I expect maybe 32 to show up, I'd get rid of the extra 13 chairs. I'd stack them up backwards in the room and then group the 32 chairs close together in 2 or 3 tight circles. There's more energy. There's more community in a physical space like that. And finally, activate student learners. And how do we do that? We do that best, it seems to me, with demonstrations of principles that are quick and easy, don't take more than 2 or 3 or maybe 5 minutes of time, utterly reliable. I don't have to be anxious about whether this is going to work. Pedagogically effective. It's illustrating a conceptual point, but also it's dramatic and unforgettable. I don't need a statistical test to see that almost every hand on this side of the room has been raised and virtually none on that side of the room, for example. And I've suggested to Nicole, I've given her some of my favorite demonstrations that meet those 4 criteria to share with those of you who are on the line with this conference call after we're done this afternoon. Tell me and I'll forget. Show me and I'll remember. Involve me, and then I'll understand. Some years ago, we used to show movies in class. And one of my great privileges was to be involved with a colleague, Frank Bottano, who for many years was chair of the AP exam committee, in creating video clips from PBS programs that were made affordably available or even freely available through publishers to what has become many, many thousands of high school and college classrooms, enabling us now to show 2 to 7 minute clips rather than 30-minute movies, clips that are focused on a particular concept that we're teaching and that bring it to life with a split brain patient or maybe a person with schizophrenia, for example. Use electronic simulations. We can also activate students with the various teaching simulations that demonstrate concepts that engage them as research participants in a simulated experiment, or that invite them to be experimenters running a simulated experiment. And these are great lab activities for the teaching of AP psychology. Of course, today we also now have clicker technology, which some classrooms are using to engage their students, even poll their students in response to questions that are put to them. And finally, there's all the new research related to test-enhanced learning that shows that when students are active, and when they're active in rehearsing their information, not just in rereading it, but in testing themselves and rehearsing it actively, they remember it better. We've created actually a little video for this, and I'm just going to show you a little clip from this. It's very easy for you to access. If you just go to the web and you type in tinyurl.com/how-to-remember, like what you see here. tinyurl.com, how to remember. And up will come a little video. Hi, I'm David Myers, psychology author and Hope College psychology professor. I'm here to help you learn how to make things memorable so that you can learn and remember more from your classes and perhaps get better grades as well. You might want to pull out something to write or type on, because the first thing you need to learn about learning is that the more actively you process and rehearse information, the better you will retain it. Let me ask you, Were you ever told that the best way to prepare for a test is to reread the chapter over and again? That the purpose of tests is simply to assess what you've learned? That you should study but one topic at a time in the same place for lengthy periods? If so, and if you believe these things, do you find yourself struggling to remember all those new concepts in your courses? Well, don't despair. There are more effective ways to learn. Here are some strategies that, if put to work in your own studies, will help you better retain what you're learning. The big idea, which has now been confirmed in lots of experiments by memory researchers like Henry Roediger and Mark McDaniel, is this. To cement new learning in your mind, what helps more than rereading is repeated self-testing and rehearsal of what you've learned. The memory researchers call this the testing effect. We also sometimes call it the retrieval practice effect. Okay, enough to give you the idea there. This is just 5 minutes all totaled, and it's freely available to you on the web, and you're welcome to have your students view it or to show it in class. So those are some of the ways in which we can activate student learners, and that was really the first part of my talk. What I wanted to share. The second is just to, as I indicated at the beginning, to give you a little overview of the organization of the College Board recommended AP course and to show you how we've mapped onto that. And then the third thing is to take on some of your questions in the time that's left. So we've got a variety of introductory psych books that we're making available. They all share 8 guiding principles in common. First, we want to facilitate the learning experience by teaching critical thinking, by always integrating principles with applications and examples, as I mentioned earlier, and then using pedagogy that reinforces learning at every step of the way. Second, I want to demonstrate the science of psychology. I want to exemplify the process of inquiry, not just the results of the game, but how we play the game. I want this to be an up-to-date psychology. And so each edition has about 1,200 new bibliographic citations. And I want to put facts in the service of those bigger ideas, those concepts that I'm hoping and you're hoping educated people will take with them into life. And so we want to promote these big ideas, these broadened horizons, this capacity for critical thinking in ways that enhance comprehension and that at the same time convey deep respect for the human creature in both its unity, its essential sameness, and also its diversity. And thus, we have coverage dealing with cultural and gender diversity across the book and an emphasis on critical thinking. The organization of the AP course now, as recommended by the College Board, is to break things into 14 different units. And we've honored that with the organization of the AP second edition text, in which now mirrors the College Board's own course description. We've then broken those down into 80 smaller modules, tiny chapters, if you will. I've asked students on a few occasions, tell me, would you rather, if you were to read a 700-page book, read it organized as 14 50-page chapters or as 50 14-page chapters? And 90 to 100% respond the latter. They'd rather read lots of short chapters. They'd rather have a 20 to 30-minute reading assignment per day than a several-hour reading assignment per week, one that's too great to read in a single sitting and which defeats them in the process. And so it's the modular version of my text that we use here at Hope College and that I've favored and that I'm delighted is built into this new AP second edition text. Everything that the College Board wants in the end says is liable to be tested on the exam is built into the course. And then, as we'll see, there's some enrichment modules for after the exam. So Unit 1 begins by emphasizing, among other things, the testing effect, which we just we're talking about. And again, the URL for that little 5-minute video animation is tinyurl.com, how to remember. The second unit of the 14 units focuses on research methods, thinking critically with psychological science, and spells out all the different research methods, their purpose, how they're conducted, their strengths and weaknesses. The third unit is on the biological bases of behavior, As you'll see from some of these slides, we periodically have AP exam tips in the margin written by Charlie Blair-Broeker, my esteemed friend and master AP teacher, who I'm going to say something more about later. Thus, we see that here, for example, on one of the pages of the 4th unit, Sensation Perception, which, by the way, has a section dealing with selective attention and accidents, reporting on the recent research on multitasking while people drive, while texting or cell phone talking. States of consciousness is Unit 5. Unit 6 deals with learning, and among other things, that terribly difficult concept of negative reinforcement that seems so easy to most psych teachers. Unit 7 deals with cognition, and here again, we encounter practical strategies in the unit on memory, the module on memory, for improving one's own memory, using, again, the testing effect in one's own life. The Unit 8 is on motivation, emotion, and stress. This includes new material on social networking and social media, which is certainly something that is a great time suck on all high school student and college students' lives, as you all know as well as anybody. Then Unit 9, again, following the order of the College Board, is developmental psychology, and this unit focuses on 3 big questions, big issues, having to do with nature and nurture, with continuity versus stages of development, and with whether, as we age, our development is marked more by stability or by change. Unit 10 is on personality, and it's fairly traditional and typical in introducing Freud's ideas and those derived from it, and then also more modern perspectives on personality. Unit 11 deals with testing and individual differences, and that's looking at intelligence in particular, which is a big focus of a whole unit in the College Board guideline. Unit 12 deals with abnormal behavior, and it is using the new terminology and classification system of the DSM-5. Say more about that a little bit later. Unit 13 is on abnormal behavior and its treatment. And so here we see in the various modules the different types of treatment for psychological disorders. And finally comes the unit, my own subdiscipline of social psychology, with its modules that deal with how we think about, how we influence, and how we relate to one another. Aggression, attraction, altruism, conflict being the social relations. After the AP exam, then there's time for some enrichment modules dealing with influences on drug use, industrial organizational psychology, 2 specific emotions that are the subject of a lot of research, anger and happiness, research from health psychology on human flourishing, and research on animal thinking and language. I must say, I'm kind of surprised that particularly these latter 3 topics aren't part of what's expected to be part of the AP course, because they are big topics. Health psychology, the new positive psychology of happiness, for example, and animal cognition and language are pretty big important topics in psychology, and so they're good topics for the post-exam enrichment unit. In the text, there are learning objectives at the beginning of each module. There are a review of those objectives at the end of the modules to help students check their learning and reinforce their learning. As I mentioned, there are exam tips that are written along the way by Charlie Blair-Broeker. Charlie, by the way, is not only a master teacher of psychology, he has for years been on the AP exam readers team. He's been an award winner at both the state and national level for awards for his teaching of AP psychology, and he's been chair of the executive committee of the National Organization Teaching of Psychology in Secondary Schools. So we're thrilled to have him contributing his expertise to AP teachers. And there's lots of practice questions, both multiple choice questions in the 5-foil format that students will face on the AP exam, and practice free response questions of the sorts that the short essay questions that students will face on the AP exam. Again, these are written by Charlie Blair-Broeker and his colleague and co-author Randy Ernst. And also the College Board identifies key contributors to psychological science related to each unit, and so these are identified at the end of the unit. And there's a study guide available on the Book Companion website. The book also differs from its college counterpart, not in content. Really, it's the same content, it's the same ideas, it's the same research. It's just organized according to the College Board organization, and the examples are more high school appropriate. So we refer to bedrooms rather than dorm rooms, for example. We're mindful that our audience may be a 17-year-old rather than a 20 or 25-year-old. And the photos, therefore, are likely to be more high school relevant. So Psychology 10th edition, for example, has an angry person here replaced by an angry high school student. Or Sensation Perception chapter has a picture of people playing in a symphony replaced by, same idea, people in a high school orchestra. Ancillaries are also specially designed for the AP classroom. There's a teacher's edition created by another master teacher, Amy Feinberg, that has all kinds of guides as to how to teach a really good AP course, how to set it up, how to teach free response writing, how to help students prepare for the exam. There's just all kinds of resources. And they include a teacher's edition that has, for each page of the text, in the margins, has teaching tips, how to pace the course, how to teach critical thinking, how to troubleshoot, videos that can be shown, research strategies, demonstrations that people can go to. So it's page by page, a teacher's guide. And there's also teacher support in a CD-ROM that's available with lots of demonstration ideas, lecture and discussion topics, worksheets, quizzes, PowerPoint slides created by Kent Corrick, textbook images if you want to show things from the textbook, and a test bank with exam questions. And the teacher CD resource is also available online for those who want to see it online. Students can find support at a Book Companion site that has critical thinking and interactive exercises, simulations, demonstrations, quizzes, and they also can buy, if they wish, a customizable ebook where their activities and responses can be fed right into the teacher's grade book. And the book also comes in another electronic form produced by CourseSmart. Excuse me. Okay, that's really 30 minutes what I had to share with you in terms of some ideas for effective teaching that maybe one or two or three might either resonate with your experience or be useful in your own teaching, I hope. And a little overview of what the College Board is suggesting that we do in creating a new book and how we've tried to honor that and reflect it in the organization and the pedagogy of the book. A number of you submitted some questions, and I picked from those some of them I thought you all might be interested in, and then we'll open the floor for other questions as well. Is the new text DSM-5 compatible? How do we teach DSM-5 now with our earlier editions? How does it differ from the previous edition of DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, that is, of psychiatric disorders? To answer that question, I sent Nicole earlier today and suggested she send each of you a comparison sheet of the old and the new DSM. Happily, they're not that much different. And in fact, the new DSM-5 is a little bit simpler because it doesn't have the axes that were used to define psychiatric categories in the old edition. And so I think she's going to send you an email with a little guide sheet that is just 2 pages that is a crisp answer to that question that could be helpful to you in your own teaching, something you could also hand out to your students if you want. Second question, what is your favorite AP Psych activity? And what I also, in response to this question, sent Nicole today is a little handout that's my 5 favorite AP Psych activities. 5 activities that are brief, utterly reliable, pedagogically effective, and memorable and fun. And so I think you will get that in a follow-up email after this webinar as well. Does the new edition incorporate new demos and experiments? How does it differ from the first edition? My job, and it's what makes this job so much fun, is I learn something new every day. It's my task, I'm charged to read psychological science, dozens of periodicals, and from everywhere I can get it. I was doing it on an exercycle at noon today, in between basketball days, and then to be able to distill from that what educated people might want to know about and to share that. It's a great privilege. And so each new edition has about 1,200 new citations from the preceding 3 years, and that's thus, even though the overall organization of the book and basic concepts don't change that much, the examples and the research and the demonstrations, the photos and everything do mutate significantly from edition to edition. That's why I'll confess I wince a little bit when I get emails from students, for example, who tell me they're reading, say, Psychology 7th edition, and we're about to come out with Psychology 11th edition 10 years later. A lot has happened. Are there online resources? Yes, there are indeed online resources, including a free book companion site, as I mentioned. There's new AP-specific videos for both teachers and students, and I leave it to you and your publisher representative can help direct you to those. Then there were some questions that were seemingly appropriate to fellow high school AP teachers. And so I put these in an email today to Charlie Blair-Broeker, and he kindly gave me his thoughts. What advice would you give to AP students? I thought somebody who's spent a lifetime teaching AP students and advising other AP teachers would be a good person to answer this and some of these other questions. And Charlie's response was, first of all, I would advise them to engage the course content every day, seeking mastery. When reading, ask questions. Be a curious reader. If you can't answer, follow up with your teacher. Distribute your study. Do not cram the night before an exam. And do not plan to cram the week before the AP exam. Distribute your study across the whole year, and you'll do better on the exam, and you'll remember it better for a lifetime. Mindful that the more you invest in the course, the more you're going to take away in the end. And this is psychology. Psychological science is about life. Take it away. Make it your own. There seems to be a trend, wrote someone, towards more free response questions for cognition and social psych units. Is my perception correct? Charlie's answer, as somebody who's very well acquainted with the AP exam as it's evolved over time, is that the same units emphasized on the multiple choice questions are also going to be emphasized on free response questions. And for both, it's important to know the perspectives, such as cognitive, behavioral, and psychoanalytic perspectives. Another question, what are the best suggestions to students for preparing for the AP exam? Again, don't leave preparation until May. Better, study once a week. Do a quick review to keep the material from past weeks, past months fresh. Take advantage of the self-test, because we know, as we've already emphasized here, that self-quizzing can be more valuable than rereading material. What are the new contemporary focus areas on the AP exam? Somebody else asked. Charlie reports that the exam gradually evolves as the field evolves. This year, for example, DSM-5 will be included. I must say, that was a bit of a surprise to me because I've always understood the AP exam as reflecting the books that are out there in use, which are often old editions of all the available books. But the field is changing, and so the exam will too. Don't be surprised if before long you see questions from positive psychology. I think teachers still don't spend enough time emphasizing the cognitive and biological influences on learning relative to what appears on the exam. Charlie concludes, I also think teachers can create needless worry by fretting about what's not in their text. No text covers it all, but the exam is normed with the expectation that all students will see some content they're not familiar with, and that's okay. Students need only score roughly half the available test points to get a passing score of 3. And if teachers do a good job teaching and students do a good job learning the text material, that's plenty enough to earn a top score of 5. So there you have it. That's 38 minutes. And so now we're going to open the mics and open the floor for your questions and your comments and observations from among the 70 of you who are online with us right now. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for listening to me. And for, I know a good many of you, thank you for the great privilege of assisting your teaching. Always happy to hear from you and have your suggestions and questions as we create new editions.
Great, Dave, thank you so much. I'm getting some feedback that it's very, this is a great presentation, and everyone's very thankful. So if anyone has any questions, you can shoot me a Skype, or if you want to raise your hand, and I will unmute you, and then you can ask your question. I know we did get a question. I've been communicating with one of our teachers on the chat function about the other teacher resources available for the second edition of Meyer Psychology for AP. I know Dave did a great presentation on the, he had some examples of the Annotated Teachers edition. I know Charlie is on the line, so he can also probably speak to that as well. But we do have, a test bank, a computerized test bank. We have the Book Companion site, which has a lot of resources, online that are completely downloadable. I believe we also have the PowerPoints. We have a whole teacher's resource CD with PowerPoints and just different types of resource materials, such as worksheets and stuff like that, that you can get digitally and then download and print to your computer. Oh, we do have another question. Jeremy, is it okay if I take you off mute? All right. Okay, you're on.
Hello, Dr. Myers. My name is Jeremy Carr. The one question I wanted to ask is I previously taught in the International Baccalaureate program, and I taught IB psychology for a number of years and was very successful. And I did have a couple kids take the AP test during that time. Are you familiar with the IB psychology at all, or?
Yes, the IBE program actually invited me to review their curriculum and comment on it, so I do have some awareness of it.
Okay, so like a correlation between the two, I know that IB focuses a lot more on depth rather than breadth. Do you see AP moving its way that way with the free response questions, or because really I would only end up covering learning, cognitive, biological levels, but we would cover it in great depth. So I'm just trying to get an idea of the correlation, I guess.
Excellent question, Jeremy, and I think from my understanding you've said it exactly right. The IBE course takes students in depth and engages them in more inquiry-based learning on a relative fewer topics. And so it really doesn't prepare them to take the AP exam, which basically mirrors what students are getting in a college or university course. Indeed, it is a college psychology introductory psych course, as I routinely explain to people. So I don't see the AP exam veering at all from that mission of being a comprehensive introduction to psychology. And I don't see the IBE program as yet veering from its mission of wanting to take students in greater depth on fewer topics. That's great, although I kind of wince at all the topics in the IBE course that are just missed, that aren't covered, that seem to me to be really, really important topics that educated people should be exposed to as part of their introduction to psychology. Do you have any, you've taught both. Do you see strengths and weaknesses or pros and cons to each?
Well, I'm actually going to be teaching the AP for the first time this coming year, so that's why I'm trying to gauge again What I really liked about the psychology, though, was that the level in IB was that the level of depth we were able to go to really kind of gave me a chance to build my students' critical thinking, around psychology, so that any time we did kind of veer into another topic, they were able to pick it up, much more rapidly by the end of the year than what they were, at the beginning. So after the IB test, which happened in May, just like AP, I was able to jump into some new topics that weren't in the IB guide, and they were able to just kind of sponge them up and absorb them. And my students who would come back and visit me a couple years later, they're like, Mr. Carr, went through my introductory class. I used your notes over this professor's notes or whatever. So, I mean, I think there's a value to that, but that was one of the things that I, missed out on, was teaching a lot of these other topics that are in the AP guide. So.
Sure. So you were teaching them, in a sense, how to think, and they could then apply that to new topics. And
Right.
I wonder if your teaching of AP Psych can, in some sense, be enriched by your teaching of IBE psychology. As I said at the beginning, AP teachers are face-to-face with their students for 4 times as many class hours as the typical college teacher. My college, for example, psych classes might meet 3 hours a week times 15 weeks. That's 45 hours. Multiply out your class hours times the number of weeks you're teaching, and you've got 4 times as many hours. So maybe that allows you to do some of that inquiry-based learning and in-depth instruction that you did in the IB course within the context of the more comprehensive AP class, and thus to have the best of both worlds. Anyway, it's just my little Pollyanna look at it.
And that's what I'm hoping for.
Okay, good luck, Jeremy.
Thank you so much.
All right. We do have another question. Diane, I'm going to take you off mute so that you can ask. All right, Diane,
Hello.
you're on.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Oh, okay, great. Hi, Mr. Myers. I was actually just curious. I know a lot of the AP tests, like AP US and AP Bio, have completely changed. Is AP Psych going in that direction as well?
I'm not aware of a big change. I'll tell you the change I am aware of, and it's really quite an exciting change, is the medical college admissions test has now a very substantial component on the behavioral sciences, which is about 60% content from introductory psychology. So for students interested in applying to medical school, introductory psychology is becoming virtually a prerequisite to taking and doing well on the medical college admissions test, the MCAT.
Okay, so you don't see the AP test in itself changing from what
but Charlie Blair-Broeker is on the line with us, and Charlie is more intimately engaged with the whole AP exam process. He's there as a reader annually. Charlie, if we could get you online, do you want to comment on this?
Charlie, I just took you off mute, so if you want to comment about any rumors about an AP Psych redesign, please feel free.
Sure. It's been a long time since I was on Test Development Committee, but I do know that the College Board is gradually going through and redesigning all of their courses. Some of them are more major and some of them are more minor. My understanding is psychology won't come around for another 4 or 5 years, and at this point, I haven't heard anything about any major revisions. The basic idea is that it's working pretty well, and we don't want to change it very much.
And actually, Charlie, this whole organization, this new organization into these 14 units is itself pretty new, and we were fortunate in that it came out just in time for us to be able to use that as the guidelines for our own organization.
Yes, and it is true that Test Development looks at that content outline every year, and it has evolved some over the years to kind of accommodate changes within the field. That's why we see the DSM-5 this year. But it's more of an evolutionary change than a revolutionary change.
Right. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
We did just hear from another teacher, Kent, who said that he hasn't heard of, they're not going to be redesigning the AP exam. Jeff, we just got a question from you, so I'm going to take you off mute.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Nope. We just got a question from Jeff, so you're off mute if you want to
Okay.
ask that. Oh, he does not have a mic. Okay, I will read it out loud then. Jeff's challenge is, one sec, I'm going to, okay. Jeff's challenge is compacting his AP course into one semester, which is especially challenging in the spring when he has about 12 weeks to deliver the curriculum.
Wow.
Yeah, I've never heard of this. He needs to be very mindful of focusing only on relevant information. Is there any other source available to see release tests or any type of assessment to help keep the focus?
Sure. Boy, that's going to be a challenge for your students, although it does mirror what the typical college student does, because college students taking introductory psych in a quarter, for example, will have something like 12 weeks in order to master the material, but they won't be taking 6 different courses in that time period. We do offer, and other textbook publishers do as well, briefer editions of the book that sometimes are well suited to shorter courses. Ours is called Exploring Psychology, and it has all the essential content, the same content basically, but covered more briefly. That's going to be tested on the AP exam, so that might be an option too.
Yeah. And Jeff, if you need to see a sample of that, or you can go to our high school catalog page, highschool.bswpub.com. There you'll be able to see the table of contents for these books, so it'll give you an idea of the compact nature of the text, or you can send me an email and we'll connect you with your sales rep to see what kind of book you can be using. The next question is coming from Tony Goodman, so I will unmute him. Okay.
Hi, Dr. Myers. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you, Tony.
I'm a great fan, and I'm one of those people who uses the 8th edition because for the last few years that's what we got.
Right, exactly.
So
and your school board and its budget are not overflowing with cash.
Yeah, we hop along and we try and skip, try and squeeze maybe 4 years out of a book. Yeah.
Right.
So I have 2 little questions and one a little bit larger. One is on the test bank, do the multiple choice type questions mirror the AP format with the 5 options for distractors now? On my 8th edition, there are 4.
That's correct. But Psychology 8th edition is the college and university text, whereas the Psychology for AP, such as in the new 2nd edition, Psychology for AP, has the test questions designed in the AP format with a 5-foil. So I don't know if I'm offering something that can't be provided, but the test bank that accompanies the AP Psychology will have the 5-foil test bank.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And so thanks. And the second one was that with the 80 modules inside the 14 units, would that be roughly what you would be pacing a class at? So one module would be roughly 1 lesson, give or take? So 80 lessons?
So there might be, I can't remember how many, 53 modules or something like that in the 8th edition. And so, you're talking, if you're teaching this over 40 weeks, you're talking a little faster pace than 1 per week. I will say this, the Psychology 8th edition and 9th edition, 10th edition, and the AP edition, the new AP edition, have a different organization, but at the end of the day, it's the same content.
Right.
And so in terms of exam performance, I don't think it's going to make that much difference. Which organization? For example, we have a Psychology 11th edition now coming out in January, and if somebody studied that, it would be organized differently. The topic sequence would be different. Development would be taught, human development would be taught later in the course, but you're still going to learn about Piaget's concepts in either case, and that's what you need to know for the exam. Pavlov, regardless of in what order Pavlov is taught is still going to be Pavlov, and classical condition is still there. And so the content is essentially identical across the books, the concepts.
Well, that's great. Thanks. And one final question. It's not really a question. It's more on advice. I have about, on average, about 70 students out of a graduating class of maybe 150, 160 that take AP Psych annually. So it's a very robust program. But we always get grade 11s and sometimes grade 10s asking for it. And I've always sort of held the line because I sort of have this opinion that there's a certain degree of maturity that I like to see in the kids, and I just use the rough and ready grade 12 is it sort of thing. Have you had thought about younger students in grade 11 or 10 ever, or feedback from other teachers about that?
Well, yeah, and I would, for that question, you've got a great resource in the nearly 70 other teachers that are online with you right now. So I would love to hear somebody else who has experience at opening the class to younger students, see the pros and cons of that, Charlie or anybody else, because you guys are out there on the front lines where the rubber meets the road.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Tony. I will say, as I'm sure some of you would say, that there are surely some 10th graders more mature than some 12th graders, and so one may need to make those decisions individually, but perhaps some of you have experience that would address Tony's question.
Tony, this is Charlie. I always taught the course to both juniors and seniors in about equal numbers, and it wasn't any problem down to the junior level. I've never taught sophomores.
Thank you.
We do have one teacher who has said that she does teach 10th graders in her AP Psychology course. Is it okay if I unmute you? Great. I'm going to unmute her in just a second. Okay.
Teachers love to be unmuted.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Rita Schwartzberg, and I've been teaching AP Psych using your textbooks for, 7, 8 years, and our school switched. We used to do 11th grade, and we've been doing it for the last 2 or 3 years in 10th, and we have 100% passing rate. The kids are serious kids. They can only get into the class if they're the kind of kid who should in 10th grade be taking AP Psych. And we're very fortunate. It is a private school, and the guidance staff is very selective who they let in. So it's only, the classes are like 20 kids large, but they're very serious about it. And I was hesitant, but it's really worked out well.
Wow, that's really positive. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Rhea.
Welcome.
I just got another Skype or another chat from Kevin. Do you mind if I take you off mute? He said that he teaches 10th graders, and their biggest struggle is with the discipline of the study skills. I think that means getting ready for the, he doesn't have a mic, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he means just the discipline of getting ready for such a big exam is a little bit daunting for a 10th grader. That could be a drawback.
Yeah, good point.
Does anyone have any other questions? You can also raise your hand, and I will unmute you.
And Nicole, will you be able, after we're done, to send those handouts that I mentioned?
Right. I will be sending an email. It'll probably be early next week. That's going to include the recording of this webinar, so you can rewatch it or send it to any colleagues that couldn't be with us tonight. I'm also going to be sending the handout that Dave mentioned, and then the DSM-5 handout as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Judy, I'm going to unmute you so that you can talk. Oh, I don't think you have actually, you don't have a, looks like you're not on audio, so. Does anyone have any questions or?
not, before we quit, I just want to thank everybody for taking time out for this hour, for caring enough to be here. It's been fun for me to be able to talk to 60, 70 people across the country in this way.